Hello everyone and welcome to Throwback Thursdays with IFA. As some of you know, IFA, India Foundation for the Arts, is a grant-making organization. We are about 25 years old, and over these 25 years, we have been supporting arts and culture projects across the country. We support projects in music, theater, film, other visual arts, performing arts, anything in the arts and culture that you can think of. And one of the things that we do, other than making grants and supporting these projects, is also to bring these projects to the larger public and have our grantees share their incredible work that they do with larger publics across the country. And before we were, locked out of public spaces and prevented from coming together as groups of people assembling together, we used to do these events around the country, big cities, small towns, where we would invite an open audience to come and listen to, watch, experience the kind of work that our grantees do across the programs. And these were sometimes like outcomes and end products, like, it would be a film or a performance. But at other times, it could also be work in progress or something that the artist is working on and puts it out there for people to respond to, give feedback to. But after March, towards the end of March, when this lockdown happened, and we were wondering, how do we continue to do this? Grant making can continue, but how do we continue this aspect of our work, which is as important, reaching out, sharing this work with the public. And that's what, like all of us, we had to quickly learn new technology, figure out what were the different ways in which we could actually bring these experiences to you online through the digital medium. Now, of course, this puts us into lots of other kinds of restrictions. I mean, we can only be watched by people who have gadgets like this or have internet connection and good internet connection and bandwidth. But what it has also done amazingly is that it has removed the geographical restriction altogether. And so we are delighted today to come to you with the sixth session that we are doing in this series, every alternate Thursday. And today we will have our grantee from Bangalore presenting to you his work, Chanakya Vyas. And I will let my colleague John and Chanakya tell you more about that. But a few Zoom etiquette to begin with. I'm sure by now in these 4 months, everybody knows where what is. But just in case you are new to Zoom, you will see in this webinar at the bottom, there's one thing called chat. Now that space essentially is for you to chitter-chatter with each other, have a conversation, put in comments of what you think of the presentation as it goes on. There is another box called Q&A. Now that's important because if you have a question, because after Chanakya finishes his presentation, we will be taking questions from the audience. And since this is a webinar and you can't be seen and you can't be heard through your voice, you'll have to type in your questions in the question box. Please remember that we will take up these questions from the question box and not from chat. So if you have a specific question for him, put it in there. Also, the ones who've signed up for Zoom, you're here. But do tell your friends that we are parallelly going live on Facebook as well. And they can put up questions there and my colleagues will transfer that to this space. So with that, I am requesting John Xaviers, my colleague in the program team, to share a little bit about what's going to happen today. John.
Thank you, Arundhati. IFA initiated the program Project 560 for the city of Bangalore. 560 as a number comes from the first 3 digits of Bangalore pin code. In Project 560, artists, researchers, organizations, and neighborhoods engage with the city creatively through artistic and curatorial interventions. Grants under Project 560 are available in 3 categories: neighborhood engagements, arts projects, and curated engagements. The interactive artwork that Chanakya Vyas will be talking about today is part of a curated engagements program of Project 560. Chanakya is representing the Bangalore-based theater company, Indian Ensemble. Chanakya Vyas is the artistic director of Indian Ensemble, and he's a playwright and theatre maker and educator based in Bangalore. He studied theatre from LISPA in London, and he also studied oral history from Srishti and Columbia University, New York. Chanakya will be joined by two storytellers today, Vivek Madan and Darshana Dave. Vivek Madan is an actor and a theatre maker. He's also a trustee of Indian Ensemble. Darshana Dave is a part of the IFA team, and she manages institutional projects. Now, please join me in welcoming Chanakya Vyas to talk about this very exciting game theatre project called Once There Was a Lake.
Thanks, Arundhati and John. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, so before I move into the presentation, I thought I will speak a little bit about how this project was formed, what was the reason behind this project, how it came to, how it took this shape eventually. To begin with, I've been living in this area called Sarjapura, Bellandur for the past 6 to 7 years, and most often people don't want to come and live here in this part of town. It is actually mushroomed after the sort of IT industry and the corridor and tech parks came in the outer ring road. And it's been funny because the fact that one of the biggest reasons they say that there is no water here, and there are more and more apartments coming up in this vicinity as this area grows. It has grown so big that now it's actually sort of gone far beyond than what was considered to be outer Koromangala, and now it's like Bangalore. So one of the key reasons for me to engage with this idea came out of my engagement with the lake in my neighborhood. And when I say engagement, I mean to say I was just any other person, any other resident in this neighborhood who used to go to the lake, because I had never been to a lake before in Bangalore. And I started going to the lake. I started spending time there. I used to walk, I used to run, I used to have so many interesting conversations with colleagues, friends. And the more time I spent there, I sort of got a bit curious about it. How did this come about? In between this concrete jungle, as they say, there is this very beautifully revived lake. And thanks to the amount of work that has been done on the lakes especially by Harini Nagendra and her team at Azim Premji University, her team of researchers, everyone has been doing fantastic work. And that has actually sort of got more people interested into this, even more academics working on it, environmentalists working on it. And I got to know about a very interesting story of the Kaikondrahalli Lake on Sarjapur Road in my neighborhood. So the first time when I sort of heard this story, I was like, oh, wow, this sounds so interesting. And, this just the wow thing that happens first. And slowly, as I started spending more time, I used to go every day. I also got to know that there is a citizen group that actually is a trust which manages this. It's called the MAPSAS Trust. It stands for Mahadevpura. It's a long sort of, it's an acronym for a very long name, but it's basically part of the Mahadevpura ward. And the more I got to read about it and know about it, I realized that there are so many other series of lakes that have been revived over the last couple of years. So this happened somewhere around 4 or 5 years ago. And then we got to meet a couple of residents in the neighborhood who have been very actively involved with the revival process and post the revival, the management of it, etc. When I saw this sort of happening across neighborhoods in Bangalore, I started finding what I found very interesting about this phenomenon is that it started showing something very interesting, which we very often we don't get to hear because it is also considered to be sort of the bureaucratic processes don't allow us. But I started seeing that these citizen pressure groups were very strongly involved with the the agencies who are involved, who are supposed to do the work. So whether it's the BBMP, whether it's the BDA was involved at one point, but then BBMP took over. And I was seeing that, okay, these are government bodies who are supposed to be doing their job, and the citizen pressure groups are making sure that the revival process takes place. And there are very interesting stories of that participatory governance, if I can use this word here, that sort of taking shape over there. And I said, this is interesting. This is something new to me, and 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 I think every time I see the times we are living in right now, and every time we talk about the responsibility of the government, etc., in all contexts, somewhere I found that at a local level, at a very, very local, minuscule level, something interesting was happening. So I said, let's tap into this. This is right, like 400 meters from my house. So, and I was like, I need to know this. I need to know what's happening in my neighborhood. I cannot be so disconnected. I cannot be living like a customer in the city. I need to be involved at some level. And not that I could do much, but I just thought that just the fact that I got involved in it, I wanted to know more about it, got me more interested. It made me feel a little more, it gave me a sense of ownership. It actually gave me a sense of belonging. And it's very, very difficult sometimes to find a sense of belonging, especially in a city like, city so big, with people coming in every day, and more so with neighborhoods that are actually just a series of apartments as you go past. So from there, the question started, and I was very curious and I was very keen to see how can I bring this in my work. And how do I simulate this? The point was to simulate this thinking process, because what was interesting here is to look at the citizen as somebody who lives there, and then look at this body which is supposed to do its work, and then there is a lake in the center. So then I started reading more about the phenomenon of the commons. What are the urban commons? And there's a huge amount of work done in Europe around it. A lot of academia in Europe has done a lot of work on this. Of course, even in India. But I found a lot of references there. And then, of course, I read a lot of work that Harini has done. Harini has written many articles citing the urban commons with the context of lakes. And I was like, okay, there is something shaping here. So this is even before I even thought of doing something with it. And then it came to a point where I said that I really want to do something, but I'm not sure if I want to do it in the way that I have been doing my practice so far, which is that we would essentially, of course, research, write a text, and then have actors, and then put up a production and take it to an auditorium. And I was constantly feeling a sense of dissonance over there. And I was like, no, that's not the form that will suit what I want to say. And sometimes in works of art, in your artistic processes, sometimes you know what you want to say much before you realize how you want to say it. And when that happens, it's also a very challenging space to be in, because you know what you want to say, but you're struggling to figure out what are the forms to it. And I got reading more about what are the other forms of performances that people are doing. And I got to know that there is an entire sort of discourse around interactive performance that is a big thing in UK. Punch Drunk does it. Coney, which is one of the very interesting companies, uses games very central to it. Punch Drunk, of course, uses a lot of environmental stuff, which is very, very, very much to do with, I'm forgetting the word, but they're very specific to a certain kind of theater that they make. And I was reading more also about Rimini Protocol in Berlin. And I was very excited by it because they were doing something which was very local, which was something very specific to what they were trying to understand in that phenomenon. And I got reading about games. And as I started reading about games, I'm not an avid gamer, but the more I started reading about games, and the more I started looking at how games have been used in interactivity in theatrical processes by very few companies. Sometimes we don't even have documentation of what has been done. So it's very difficult sometimes to say how what has been the impact of this, or how successful are these? Again, success being a very tricky word in the making of art. But I sort of tried to connect these dots, and I was like, okay, there is something about participation. That's something I'm interested in. I want people to make difficult choices. I want people to have a sense of consequences, and I want to remove that layer of the actor and the spectator. I was very keen that the audience takes some of these risks and consequences, of course, in a safe space within a very artifice kind of an environment. So that's where it began, and I started. We, of course, that's when the idea sort of started shaping up, and we applied to the Project 560 grant, and that led to that led to a completely different way of looking at the whole thing. And we realized, oh wow, we can realize this actually the way we want it. We can take time on this. We can actually spend sort of time, resources, and money in the way we want to do it, in the best way that we can do it. And that's where it began. And once we got the grant, we started planning it. And at a very initial stage, I started putting up a very small team. So some of my team members, Satvik, joined in very early in research. Then you have, then we had some interns who joined us. And then as we moved ahead, I also had a dramaturg on board, Tanvi Shah. And the initial conversation was between the three of us. And of course, Vivek was also there in the meeting today. And Vivek and I, of course, spent a lot of time initially formulating the idea, putting this thought of how do we produce this as a company. Yeah. So I know I can go on and on. Sometimes these are good things to reflect on your processes. But I'm aware that this is a webinar and we need to be mindful of the time. So I'll speak a little more about this, but it was important for me to give this context. And as we moved ahead, more collaborators came on board, and I'll talk about them. That really shifted the project, that really gave it a sort of a life that it needed. And truly, I would say, I think I'm very glad to have an ensemble which really holds me through this, has really held me actually through this time and keeps holding me. So I'm going to share my screen. I've prepared a presentation. I'll take you through that. And I'm going to share the screen right now. Okay. I hope this is visible. Yeah. Okay.
It's visible.
Yeah, great. Thank you, John.
You want to go full screen, Chanakya?
Yes, I'm going full screen. Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Okay, so this is the poster of the piece. We were supposed to open in the mid of April, and as we all know, we've been in lockdown since then. And of course, we are unlocking now, as they say. But of course, we are going to take a stock of things as and when it's the right time to do this. This is a poster designed by the Sorted Pandit Studio, and I'm going to start with the map of the neighborhood. So this is the map of the neighborhood. So when the audience comes in, they basically, of course, are coming into a context, into a world that we have built. And this map is essentially the starting point of the piece. And of course, it's interactive because they need to interact with this board. And this entire idea of putting this into the form of a game, into mapping it on the board, was designed and planned by Dhruv Jani, who runs a fantastic studio called Studio Oliomingus in Vapi, a small town in Gujarat, very close to Daman. And thanks to IFA, I met Dhruv Jani in last October at the IFA Past Forward event, and then his game was on the second floor. And I saw very few people, like in the sense people were going and they were like, they were very, I was, okay, is there a game? We don't know if you want to play a game. And then there were many people who were like engrossed in the game. So I just played the game, and I really loved the way I'd never seen a game like that, because it was narrative. I've never seen narratives in games. So I played that, and we exchanged contacts, and we got in touch in December. And since December, we have been collaborating on this, and uh, we developed some content from here. We would share with him, then we would try some things here. So of course, a lot of things have happened over a period of time, and we're just so happy to have someone like Dhruv on board to do this. So this is the starting. If I would call this is the entry into the performance. This is how the people enter. They see this, which is set up at the center, and this is designed keeping 12 players in mind. I know there has always been a question of why not more, and the way we're thinking of this is to have also people who can view this and not play. So that could involve more people. However, one of the interesting things that I also feel sometimes it's sometimes good to also have a smaller number so that one can engage in a more deeper way, which sometimes you miss in the bigger spaces where there's a bigger number. And this sort of small intimate space sometimes allows for something very interesting to happen. And I'm very fond of those things. I really I like being in those intimate spaces, in those spaces where conversations can sort of have a journey from one point to the other, and it's not passive. So at this point, there is a small narration that comes, and the audience, the players, sort of listen to it before they start. So I would request my my colleague Vivek, who's on this call. Vivek is an actor. He does many things, and of course you can. I'll not go into the introductions, but I've got Vivek on board to read the introduction to this piece. So yes, thank you, Vivek, and if you can start.
Welcome to the neighborhood. You are the ones who live in this neighborhood, and today you are gathered here because the boon of privilege that you have enjoyed thus far has been taken away. You received this boon at the time of your birth, but as we know very well from our epics, all boons are time-bound. Nowadays, they are even subject to market risks. So the story goes like this. A few hours ago, while you were still privileged, you woke up to the magical taps in your homes going silent. You tried using all your spells and powers to figure out the reason behind this, but nothing seemed to work, and this was unusual. The fact that none of you could use the power you had, just before you went to sleep last night. You even tried reaching out to different water lords in your city, right from Sri Manjunatha to Sri Chaudeshwari to Sri Bireshwara to Sri Balaji, but even they seemed to have run out of water. As per their knowledge, they say there is a curse that has been activated upon your neighborhood by two deities, Gangamma and Dugilama, who, as legends say, live beneath the dry land, right at the center of your neighborhood, where once there was a lake. A lake that was once a water tank, and people who lived there used to pray to these two deities in order to have abundant water throughout the year. As time passed, these just remained as local water bodies, and there were hundreds of them connected to each other in a series. And as villages turned to towns and towns into cities and now cities into smart cities, one by one, they disappeared. And what lies in the middle of your neighborhood today is a vast, dry patch of land. And the water lords believe that Gangamma and Dugilama are still there, somewhere under the dry lake bed, old, angry, and cranky, waiting for you all to revive the lake and reimagine your neighborhood. But this is easier said than done. You will have to make choices, and each choice will have its own consequence. As you can see on the board, next to the dry land, there are tall, symmetrical buildings, beautiful villas and bungalows where some of you live. And around these buildings are small, asymmetrical settlements, and in them live people who work for you. And somewhere around the corner are industries with opaque windows that run the city. Well, what would we do without them? And you may ask, what is a city? just a place of dubious wonders, desires, and dreams, where each of us is making a choice every day, sometimes known, and most of the time unknown to us. Coming back to the curse. The curse is carried by each of you who live here. And today you will make choices which will have their risks and their consequences as you play this game about reimagining your neighborhood, where once there was a lake. And now the rules. Number 1, each player has 4 cards in their hand. 2, you have to play 2 cards from your hand at each turn. You can then play a card by replacing it or stacking it. To replace, exchange a card from your hand with 1 card or a stack of cards on the board. To stack, place the card in your hand on a lower value card already on the board while following the stackings rule shown on the top right of each stackable card. At the end of your turn, you should still have 4 cards in your hand. If you have more than 4, continue playing. If you have less than 4, draw new cards from the deck. The deck in the center is your pool of resources. And in your player card is the victory condition you need in order to undo your curse and regain your privilege. But this time, the privilege will not be the same. What it is something you will know only once you reach there. The game ends when the resources are over. So are we ready to get to the other end?
Thank you, Vivek. I just wanted to quickly also share the 5 main resource cards that are there as part of the game. The one in the red is actually the card which we call as the building or the settlement card, which sort of defines the population that's there. The one in the gray is essentially the wealth, or how the industries sort of play a role in the formation of the city, in the neighborhood, etc. The center one, of course, is water. The one in the green is the habitat, also depicts the kind of greenery and the kind of ecological life that can exist in this neighborhood. And the brown is the dry land that is there. This is a sample of how a player card looks like. So I've just shared 2 player card samples. What you see is the number is, let's say, player number 11. There are now the victory conditions essentially work with the fact that if you have these 4 color cards in your hand, by which I mean the blue is water, the green is greenery, habitat, and 2 building cards, which essentially means population cards. If you have these 4 cards in your hand, while the scoreboard, now the scoreboard is nothing but a simple exact count of the number of cards on the board. So if there are more than 8 or more than 8 water cards already on the main board, then that would get noted on a major score, on the big scoreboard that's put out after every round. So you need to keep a track of what is happening with the scoreboard. So you need to have a minimum of these number of points. And if you get these 4 cards at some point during the game, while meeting these conditions, you can claim a victory, by which you mean you can now step out of that and enter a different space where there are a different set of cards given to you. So that's just an example of how the player card looks like, so that you know what you're playing for, what are the choices you're making. And roughly from the trial rounds we did sometime in Jan and Feb, we found that it takes about easily nothing less than 40 to 45 minutes for even someone to claim a victory condition. So that's the way the game has been designed, that it takes that much time so that you end up making all kinds of choices during the course of the gameplay. And the game has run sometimes up to 90 minutes also. So it really depends on how the group is playing the game. Another interesting thing that happened during this is I met Shilpa Mudbi, who runs the Urban Folk Project with some of the wonderful people. Shilpa and Aditya run this, and you can meet them every Sunday. Of course, before the lockdown, you could meet them every Sunday at the Cubbon Park, and I think also on a Monday. I'm not sure if I'm getting the days right, but they used to be there. They used to go to Cubbon Park and just share the songs they've collected. It's a fascinating kind of work they do. So I remember speaking to Shilpa after one of the performances, and she had mentioned that she's also looking at songs around lakes. And I went and met her, and then she said, and I had sort of got this reference about the Gangama Dubilama through one of the research papers that Harine's team had put out. And I connected this, and she met this very interesting woman called Kempama, who lives near the periphery of the Belandur Lake. And she had found this song, and she told her about this song. And then as part of this game, what we do is we begin the game with a song. As I have just borrowed it from what a lot of traditional performances do, where they start with an invocation, usually to Ganesha, but here we do an invocation to Dugilama and Gangama. So I'm going to play a small clip of that track. Yeah, so that was the song, and let me just return to the slide.
It's showing.
Yeah, one second. Yeah, so that was a beautiful song that she recorded and composed it and performed it for us. Great. Coming to just giving you a sense of how the game is. I've been thinking a lot about what is the best way that I can show this. And then after a very, very long conversation with Dhruv, who's also the designer, we thought that the best we could do at this moment was we could give you a small mock-up of the game, not very long. And what I have just done is I've made the board smaller. So it's a 3x3 board right now. And on the left is what you see is the player cards. So usually you have 4 cards that you're holding, but for this trial, I've just kept 3. And the deck on the right, usually it's face down, but I've just kept this here for a trial version. So if I can invite John to come in, and I'm going to sort of go back to the regular screen because I'll have to toggle with these cards. Yeah. So John, I'll take you as a player, and let's say, roughly for now, let's say you are player 11, who's supposed to be getting, also equal amount of industries and settlements, more settlements actually. Okay. Just to give you a context, this is the kind of game. Of course, we won't be playing a full game, over here.
Okay.
But what I would like you to do is you can tell me where do you want me to place the card. Just to sort of reframe the rules, you can stack or replace. That's the two things you can do. So you can actually stack a card. So you can stack card on top of dry land anywhere. Okay. So if it's, for example, so if it's 2, you can put a 3 on top. If it's 5, you can put a 6 on top, and you can put any of the cards, essentially with numbers. The green card and the blue card, which is the water and the greenery, don't have numbers.
Okay.
And you can exchange any card with any card. So that always remains. So what we'll do now is you play 1 card from the 3. And if you're short of 3, you can pick, I'll pick 1 from the deck and give it to you. And if you just actually exchange, you will not be short of cards. So if you only stack, you will end up having to pick from the deck. So that's also something which is very intricately designed by Dhruv, where players also, after a couple of rounds, they start realizing, okay, where are the real resources that they really want to play with? Because and that I think is a very interesting aspect of the game, where how does the reveal of understanding this also happens over the course of the game. So great. So John, if you can tell me which card you would like to place. You have 3 and you have to play 1 in every round.
Okay, so I'll put. So I'm playing the character of an industrialist.
Well, I'm not going to give you a name. I'm just going to say that. So that's one more thing. We kept away from giving any kind of titles like industrialist and.
Okay.
We didn't, because I think these titles actually remain as ideas sometimes. They don't essentially help you play the game, because we also want you to go through the typical uncertainty and the mask and the counter mask of a human being. So we just give you the victory conditions, and they make you play and think in a certain way. So
after Corona, we had to energize the industry.
Yeah.
So I want to put industry.
Boo!
You want to put the industry?
Atmanirbhar.
What?
So where do you want to put the industry?
So I will take the water resources and put industry there.
Okay, that's a very strong choice.
Strong, that's an evil choice, Chanakya. Call it out. It's an evil choice.
I am just enabling the game. Right. As I said at the beginning, the players take consequences of their action. Don't worry, it will come back to him.
I'm a philanthropist as well. I make a lot of money.
So first you take away and then you give it back. Yeah, great. So you got it. Yeah. So I've exchanged an industry. So there's no water now.
Then
yeah.
Now we need a residency for my employees. So I put 3 on top of 2. That residency on top of the dry land. Which
2, in the second one or the third?
The second one, as in nearby the factory. No, nearby the factory. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that the employees can come and go to the factory.
Okay. So I'm just going to now give you 1 card from the deck.
Okay.
See, now you have to make some conscious choices. Environmentally conscious.
I'll build a garden for my employees.
Yeah. And so you'll have to exchange it, basically.
Yeah. So I will put garden right at the center of the city.
Here, at 5?
At 5, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Now we have a lot of water coming in.
Sorry, pardon the.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think my computer has just become a little slow. Yeah, but yeah. So you made this choice of of putting this here. Okay.
Hmm.
Let's play one more round. What would you like to do next?
Now I'll put, I'll build a swimming pool for the employees and the children.
But this is not a swimming pool. This
A
is
lake.
this
Build
is.
a lake.
So you want to put water basically.
Exactly. Nearby the garden so that the families can chill out.
Okay. So which card would you like to replace?
So I'll put lake on top of that dry land.
You can't put it on top. You'll have to exchange it. Yeah.
Okay. Then let's exchange it.
Okay.
See, you shouldn't have taken out that water in the beginning. You think you can live without water? Now you're putting the water back. So
As I said, it will come back to him, and he'll have to give back what he has snatched. Yeah. So okay. So I mean, this was just a very simple way to show. This goes on, and as you end up pulling more cards from the deck. Now this is just with one player. Okay. When you have actually 12 players making choices, the board shifts very, very drastically. What ends up happening is I'm going to show you a small video now, which actually shows the journey of the board from, just to give you a sense of how the board transforms. I hope the video works the way it's supposed to. There's no sound, so don't worry about this. John, let me know if the video is visible.
I'll tell you when it's on.
Yeah. It's visible?
It's not playing yet.
Yeah, it's not playing, but is it visible?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. So as you can see, this is just a very dummy round that we recorded over 1 hour. And this is how it transforms the whole place as you make these choices. You will find usually in the middle of the game somewhere, people will make really, really conscious choices of putting water and greenery. And then you realize that somewhere in, I would call it like the third act of the game, it sort of again shifts, because now you're not going to have enough of these cards. So you'll have to again take away things. So the negotiation keeps happening for a while till the deck, till the resources in the deck run out. But while this is happening, there is also the idea of some of the stories that we wrote, we developed in the course of the making of this. And these stories were essentially something that we thought would come out in the somewhere at what is happening on the board would lead to let me say the situations or certain triggers would open up this thing. And we're just going to read out 2 stories. And I'm going to share the image of the board. So this is a video which I shared. And so what is happening around while you're making these decisions? So while these players are making decisions, there's also stuff that is happening as you do this. There are other stories that are evolving. And as we're developing this, we could not do a trial round with a full-fledged trial round with this. We did a trial round with a lot of initial set of stories that we wrote. But the idea is that we feel that there can be a very interesting connectedness of how one story can leave you at a point and then the next story picks it up from there. There could be characters who come again. So closures that could happen of that. And these are fictional stories that we develop. So let's imagine this is the state of the board at some point during the game. And a probable story that could come here, we thought, is that the water has started coming in. There is some greenery. So clearly, the birds, the sort of habitat is also slowly coming back to life. And in this scenario, it doesn't mean the rest has stopped. There's still enough construction happening around. There's still a lot of dry land around. What would happen is something that we imagined as a story. So now I will request, this time Vivek will be joined also by Darshana from India Foundation for the Arts. And so both of them would be reading this story. Yeah.
It was an unusual morning. There was a thundering sound and it shook the trees near the lake where a vulture and a crow were busy chatting with a flock of migratory birds who had moved in just a few days ago, considering now there was some water and greenery. The new birds, being new to these parts, were too scared to investigate, so the vulture and the crow decided to do an aerial survey of the busy neighborhood to check out what caused the noise. While they were going round and round in circles, the vulture felt dizzy and shouted to the crow, "Hey, it looks like I'm turning diabetic. Full head is spinning."
Don't worry. You just come in the front and I'll push you from the back with my claws. Just close your eyes and enjoy the breeze, da.
Hey, but if I close my eyes, how will I see what's there down beneath us?
That I will see and tell you.
As they were flying, the crow noticed something.
Hey, some fellow is dumping kilos of mud into the lake. He has a huge neck with a tub-shaped mouth. Shall we go down closer?
What? Who is it? Who is messing with the lake again? My dear fish are there. And where is Koel, the love of my life? Is she fine? I can't open my eyes. I will feel dizzy. Tell me what's happening.
Oh, wait. Stop panicking. Let me see who it is.
The crow peered down.
It just reads JCB. Looks like some Asura types. Very dangerous, pa.
Asura? So early in the morning, Asuras will not come. Very, very doubtful.
Maybe we should go tell someone about this.
What? Whom can we tell?
Some human, considering they have the power of speech.
Yes, but what use is their power if they are too wise to use it?
Let me try and poop on them to grab their attention. You rest on this branch.
So, the crow landed on one of the balconies of a high-rise apartment next to the lake and cawed loudly. But the human in question was too busy looking at the photo of a melting glacier on her phone. Finally, the crow did as she said she would. The poop landed with a splash on the sparkling white marble tile in her balcony. Immediately, the human looked up and tried to shoo away the crow. But the crow had had enough.
The lake's at stake. Someone is dumping kilos of mud into it. Stop looking at melting glaciers. Look at what's happening around you.
Okay, so that's where the story sort of ends. And these characters, some of these people come in again, some of these things would extend from here further. But this is a small interjection that happens in the middle of the game. Now we have a poll. There's an interesting poll that we have prepared, and poll should be up now. And it'll be great if you can respond to it, to the poll.
Yeah, we're just giving you 30 seconds to respond quickly. Click away. The question is, for some people who may not be able to see the poll, do you live near a lake? Simple question. Yes or no? And that's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Shall we see, Chanakya?
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's like the perfect 51-49. Stakeholders.
And this is why we have coalition governments.
Great. Wow. Okay. So that's like a bigger number from the lakes. Yeah, great. Just move ahead. And the next thing is, it will be nice, those who live near a lake, if you can type in the name of the lake and your neighborhood in the chat box, and that's something you can just do. Do you want to give them some time, or should we just move ahead?
Yeah, maybe they can just keep writing it.
Yeah, they keep writing it. Okay, so type in the name of the lake and your
We have
neighborhood.
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, it's coming up.
I'm sure many from Bangalore. So
Yeah.
great.
Tushar from Ulsur Lake nearby. Ulsur Lake in Kupta.
I mean, if you're not in Bangalore, still you could say, you know, that whichever lake,
Yeah, I'm sure.
whichever city. Ah, we have one. Kulatheri in Coimbatore. Chennai, Vellachedi Lake. Lovely.
Lovely. Good. So I'm just going to take quickly to the second story. This is again another state that the board would reach in. And this is where we would say a major part of the what?
One sec, Chanakya.
Yeah.
I think everybody is responding only to all panelists. And that's the reason why all the attendees can't actually see what's coming up. So I'm requesting all attendees, please choose when you're typing all panelists and attendees. Then everybody will be able to see.
Okay.
So up to Shubham and everyone before that were mostly just sending it to panelists. That's why we couldn't see it.
Okay, great. So just moving ahead, just to read one more story that we developed, and there are several which would come up around at least about 7 to 8 stories that are again based on certain questions that Satvik and I framed during the writing process. This is another state. Now, this is where we would essentially say that a major part of water has been revived. A major part of the greenery is also coming. And this is when it becomes a huge attraction for stakeholders of different kinds. And let's see through the story what that means. I would request Vivek to just narrate this.
Once again, Betala kidnapped Vikrama from his palace, brought him to the lake, and started telling him a story that goes like this. The famous civil engineer Hanumanta, who once built bridges across seas to connect lovers, was brought in to carry out the rejuvenation of our lake. Within a year, he and his dedicated army transformed the stinking marshy land into a pristine lake, a spot that would unite many lovers. Being the shrewd fellow that he is, MLA Sri Krishna was unhappy with Hanumanta's work. He said, "The lake has come back to life. I agree. But what about the area around the lake? Why is there no concrete walking track, no flower garden, no boating, fishing, swimming, scuba diving? If there are no facilities, how can I show development? How can I ask for votes?" Hearing this, Partha, the famous real estate businessman who had accompanied Sri Krishna on the visit, came up with a solution. "Paramatma, I will build all these things for you, free of cost. All I ask for in return is a direct entrance to the lake from my apartment, which is being built next to the lake. With this public-private partnership, both of us can thrive. What do you say?" "That is great. It saves us crores of rupees," Krishna exclaimed. Turning to the engineer, he asked, "Hanumanta, what do you say?" "Now tell me, Vikrama, did Hanumanta support this offer from Partha? If so, on what grounds? If not, what would be the reasons? Remember, if you don't answer this correctly, I will eat away all the vegetation around this lake and make it a barren town."
Okay, thank you so much, Vivek. That was a wonderful narration. So yeah, this is another story. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just coming towards the end of the presentation. So I know the times are uncertain. We don't know when things will get back to maybe the new normal, but we are really hoping to bring this to lake parks in different neighborhoods. We wanted to start it with the neighborhood where it all began, which is in my neighborhood. We were all excited. We were all ready to go. And if you think this could be brought to your neighborhood, I know it's too early, too difficult to have any conversation right now at this moment, but you can write to us at indianensemble@gmail.com. That's our email ID. Or you can also send us a message on Facebook. A lot of people send messages on Facebook page. Indian Ensemble, if you just search, you will find the Facebook page. Yes, and with this, I would like to give a huge, I would say, for team for bearing this with me for the last couple of months. I've been like behind their lives. I can clearly say that. This is the most wonderful team I think I could have imagined that has come on board with this. And everybody came in at very different points. Like I said, Satvik, Tanvi, and I started working very early on. As the piece developed, as we went more towards the form of it, as we went more towards deciding what shape it would take, Dhruv played a very critical role in also. It was very interesting because he was not in Bangalore. So we would play these rounds, and Tanvi had designed a very interesting feedback mechanism. So we would put that out on a blog, and then he would read it. We would send him photos. He would send back. So we were doing all this remote thing before the pandemic. But, but I mean, just for jokes. But jokes apart, what I mean is that this collaboration has been there for couple of months, I think 4 to 5 months roughly. In fact, Tanvi, Satvik, and I started in November sometime. So that has been there, and to everybody who's been involved in the project. Sangeeta, who came on board in January, who took charge of the entire planning and trial rounds and the production management of it. Sorted Pandit Studio, which done the entire illustration and design. And these stories that we read, depending on where we are, we also kept this piece in such a way that we designed it in such a way that we could take it to places where sometimes, not always in lake parks, also we can access all neighborhoods. We found that a lot of children who were 12, 13-year-olds were very excited with this game. So we did one show at the Buguri Library in Banshankari. It was a very eye-opening and a very interesting experience that we had. So at places where there would be a possibility of doing the entire piece in Kannada, we would be doing that, essentially the stories, because the rest of it is very universal in terms of signs and symbols. Yeah, and our heartfelt thanks and gratitude actually to all these people here. Right from every person we connected in the citizen group, every other member we met, we called up, and we got numbers from one person to the other. We would say, okay, can you give me the number of someone from Agara Lake? Oh yeah, I'm sending it to you. Can you give me someone from Puttanali Lake? Oh yeah, I'm sending it to you. Oh, from Rachanahalli Lake, from Jakkur Lake, from this lake, from that lake. And within these so many lake committees and lake groups, all these things are very different. It's not the same. What works in Bellandur.
There are over 80 lake committees, no, Chanakya?
Yeah. And the plan is to revive more than 100 lakes. But the point is, again, it has to be seen as a very interesting collaboration with the residents. And that has been a challenge. And that has also been something which I have learned a lot through this project. And truly, I would say this is a very Bangalore project, because having met so many people in the city who have day jobs, who are going regular lives, but then you go and you meet and they're like, oh, but no, I was involved when this happened. I know when the lake was on fire. I know when there was somebody encroaching the land. We got together, we did this, we did that. And there are so many stories. And that truly, I feel, is the essence of the game, where we want people to come in and want to simulate this environment. In this environment, how can you create a space for critical thinking? How can you make people think about this through all these stories and the whole idea of distancing through game? Because when you're playing the game, you're so involved in it that you actually immersed in it really well. And all the people who are here, I don't want to take names, I'm just putting the slide here. And thank you IFA and Project 560 for supporting us. I mean, this has it's really been a very interesting experience for us, because it allowed us to really go into territories we may not have been very confident of had we not had the grant. So, and I think that's one of the best things I feel that this grant did to us, to me, to my artistic journey, to the companies, the way the company would grow, and the kind of work we would like to do. So on that note, yeah, I would just say thank you. And if once there was a lake, this is something we came up with while we were doing some small audio recording. There can be one now too, and many more, of course. So yes, I hope this has not been too long, but tried my best to encapsulate as much as I can about the presentation. So thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Thank you everybody at IFA for doing this. Sometimes to go back to the project and look at it objectively for a presentation helps. It sometimes helps us to just go back and look at what works, what are some of the questions that we explored, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, but please don't go away. The way Chanakya is saying thank you, it's almost like we haven't put curtain down yet.
No. I'm just saying this curtain, the PPT curtain is going to go down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, don't go away. You can now have lots of questions, and please start putting your questions in the Q&A section. But we'll have first John, who's been the program officer on this project. And you know, John came in midway into the project. And so John, maybe you begin with your questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience.
I just want to note that Shubham Roy Chaudhary, who initiated the project, is also there with us. So he'll also engage with us.
Shubham will not be allowed to ask any questions.
So Chanakya, I really enjoyed the talk, especially the aspect of different layers of the narrative. There is the game aspect, there is folklore, storytelling, music. At the same time, the urban condition. So, artistically speaking, to arrive at a form for such a multi-layered concept can be extremely challenging. So, what was the process of arriving at the form, card playing form? Because it seems to be optimal. I don't know what else did you consider, or how did you arrive at it?
Yeah. Okay. That's. So we initially started. Actually, this is interesting because we actually started doing trials of existing games. So we also played one round of Dungeons and Dragons. We also played this game called Fives, developed by Kony, which is a theater company based in UK, which uses a lot of games in their work. We use these things just to get a sense of it, how it works, what happens. And as we were talking also to Dhruv somewhere between November, December, what we started realizing is that one thing is very interesting about cards, because a lot of people have that association of, this idea of holding cards, right? This idea of a conceal and the reveal, and that automatically creates a sense of, I don't want to say suspense, but a sense of what I would say is what would come out, how that would change. And initially, when we were actually working on it, again, we bought a lot of different kinds of card games, which we had never heard of, thanks to Dhruv, and also thanks to Tassos from UK, who told us about other kinds of games that they've used. And when we were working on it, our initial conversations around form were very, very sketchy. So when actually, even before Dhruv sort of came in sometime in November and December, a lot of conversations between the team was largely about, let's fix upon things that we really want to say and what is the best way to say it. Now, when we look at the idea of a game, what are the possible formats within game theory that exist? So it was a very tricky phase. We were all like going meow, 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 all over the place. But it's fun, right? I mean, that's the whole point. Like, if you're so certain from day one, then why would you do it? So the whole point is to live in that uncertainty for a while. It's very frustrating. I'm sure my team members will be nodding their head if they're listening this right now. It's frustrating. But the thing is, sometimes you have to stay with something. You have to stay with it because form appears. The form also appears. I'm not saying it's magic, but it sort of form comes out as you work on it. And when we started choosing the idea of cards, we had a very basic idea around looking at the research we had done. And we were constantly trying to beat away the research from it. but somehow we were struggling to completely move away from the lakes and move into a very abstracted version of it. So initial stages when we were working on a trial version, Dhruv would actually just tell us some very basic game theory fundamentals. We said, just try this tomorrow in a trial round. So we would try it. We would try it and we would be like, oh, but people were like, they were not like engaged and this and that. And that time Dhruv would be like, yeah, of course they won't be engaged in trial one. So just take your time. It's fine. Just call people you think you can trust and you're comfortable with. So we actually even sent out a long email asking people to sign up as players if they would be interested. And that was so useful. A lot of them came in the first time. Then a couple of them sort of kept coming. There are people who have come actually for every trial we've done. And I'm so thankful to them because somehow when they came for the final design, they were like, oh, this is just transformed. And that was so nice to see that the transformation happened. So coming back to your question, when we chose this idea of cards, that is when sometime around December and Jan, I said that, okay, we've spent enough time on these cards and stuff like that. Let me just put out one small piece of text and see what happens. So I wrote a small piece of text of what I had in mind, what I wanted to say. Again, sometimes you know what you want to say, but you don't know how you want to say it. Sometimes you know what you want to say much, much sooner, much faster in the process. Again, that would evolve. And that did evolve. And when I wrote that text and I sent it to Dhruv one night, and I think about 3-4 days down the line, he said, I thought of something, some ideas came to my mind and I've cracked something. And we said, okay, let's go with it. Let's do a trial. Let's see what happens. And we did a trial. And the first thing that happened with the form is we managed to get into the immersive nature of it. It helped us go one step a little away from reality in that sense. And the more we did a trial of the same thing with different versions, different ways, we spent entire Jan and Feb just working on the form of it, the question that you were asking. And I think the more we worked, we realized that this allowed us so many things to incorporate in it. And it had a very universality to it, the symbols, the design of it. And we wanted to keep that. We didn't want it to become something so difficult that one would have to spend a couple of hours to know it, of how to do it. So these were some of the constraints we had in mind. And then working with Dhruv, collaborating with Dhruv, and then the stories came in. So we went all around, and parallelly we were having conversations around what is the theatricality. How do we bring in the theatricality? And those were some of the very, very interesting conversations that Tanvi and I had over a period of time. And those brought out many other questions of form, of space. At one point, we were also looking at the idea that let's look at all theatrical elements and let's see what we can do in this. But yeah, I don't have a very linear answer to this. It's a very back and forth process. And there's one point where that the best thing is, and I was listening to a talk that Sunil was giving last weekend, and he said one of the things about, I don't know whose rehearsal he was talking about, the best is to test in front of your audience. सबसे अच्छा test rehearsal का वहीं होता है. And I've heard so much about Habib Tanvi doing that. I'm just referring to things I know from theatre, and I felt that this was something that was happening to just do it there and to actually see people respond to it. How are they responding with the material? How are they responding with the idea? And that gave us so many clues, that gave us so many things to look back. The feedback was also structured feedback. So that helped us look at specific points to rework on. So the form evolved over a period of time. I would say it's still evolving. If you really ask me, just 3 days ago while I was working on this presentation, we hit upon another idea. So this becomes like an animal, actually. This is just growing. This is going on growing, We have to stop it at some point, but yeah.
Yeah, let's look at the other questions because we have a couple. Yeah. And maybe shorter answers so we can take all the questions.
Yes. Yeah? I'm sorry.
No. Sure. It's lovely to hear about the process. So one question is about, any particular reason why the board's initial setup didn't have a water card. So you want to talk a little bit about how you set up the first board, maybe?
So it again varies. I think, so there was one version where we used to have 2 water cards, on the board. There are, and I think not having water cards also creates a sense of urgency in the board that there is nothing over there. Sometimes having 2 water cards completely placed at different corners of the board creates a sense here, okay, there is water, but how can we add more to it? One of the things we added much later on in our process, is to keep water cards adjacent to each other, so that area sort of develops over a period of time. But the point of the starting point of the board, the way the board looks, is essentially to create the starting anchor into the game, that there is no water. So if you have to revive this, how would the game would begin from there? The revival thing would start from there. So yeah, it's kept keeping that in mind.
I'm asking the next question. It's a combination question, because I think it's divided into 2 parts. One is, what's the point of the game? As in, what's your point in creating it? And do you think that by playing the game, there'll be a change in one's thinking about future imaginations around lakes and disappearing water bodies in cities?
The point of the game is, there are many things, but I'm going to keep it to two very important things. One is, the point of the game is to actually simulate that environment of what it means to have different stakeholders making decisions around commons, right? Around these common spaces. One is to simulate that process, because it's not always the easy thing, right? I want to play the nice, ecologically conscious person all the time, but when I'm in this game, I'm going to make tough choices. So one is to simulate that. Second is, I think, while playing the game, and this I'm speaking from trial rounds and the feedback, a lot of people have shared interesting stories they have come across. A lot of people have asked interesting questions around it. And coming back to this question of, do you think this will bring a change? I mean, this is an eternal question, right, in the arts. I mean, how do you answer this question? I mean, I'm also figuring this out. I would say, keeping this project in mind, I would say, even if this encourages someone to go and say, let me figure out the story of the lake in my neighborhood, let me understand it a little beyond what I think I know, then I think there's a starting for a change. Because one of the things, when I spoke to Usha, who's one of the members of the Puttenahalli Lake Trust, and Usha said that it's so difficult sometimes to bring in people to sort of participate in this entire process sometimes, is because the sense of ownership doesn't exist for many of them. They come to the lake, they go there, and I'm not saying it's something like a rule that, oh my God, you have to become. That's why I'm saying that if there are 100 people going, even if 2 people decide to take that interest in knowing more about it, I think that's how these special groups are formed. And sometimes you don't need 100 people. Sometimes you just need those 2 to 3 people to actually drive the thing further. So yeah, those are the 2 things which we've kept it as a thing from the beginning. Actually, we wanted to create the simulation of this through this format.
Okay, the next question is, isn't all game theater by your definition? And how is this game theater then?
Is it all game theater? And how is this game theater?
Isn't all game, I'm assuming there's a punctuation.
Okay. Isn't all game theater?
Theater by your definition. How is this game theater then? Or is it that all games are basically, taken from theater, as there are roles and I guess there are rules? Roles and roles are the 2 things that make a game, right, in some way.
Yeah, so I would like to broaden this in my answer. You know that there's a difference when you buy a board game and you play it with your family members.
Yeah.
This is not that, right? So what is one of the most important things about, let's say, a performance? When I say I'm going to watch a performance or watch a theater show, I would say the first thing is the fact that people gather, right? And people are gathering here. The game here acts as a form, as a medium to enable that through making movement. So of course, game plays a very important role here. But I don't know if all game is drawing from theater, because I mean there are all kinds of board games. One can always say that, oh, this was such a theatrical experience to play this game, but within this entire, again I'm saying this because the documentation is really sparse on this around game theater or interactive game performances that are happening. They all fall within the realm of the audience engaging with something here, and we use the form of a game here. So I don't know if I'm answering it exactly to what the question is, but I am not sure if all game draws from theater in that sense. Okay. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So there's another question about, how we have only seen in this presentation a slice of the game, right? So this person would like to know a couple of examples of conflict that arose, while people were playing the game. And I'll add one more question to it, is about stereotypes that one might perhaps have that will affect the outcome of the game while playing the game. So are there stereotypes that you're also, I'm just going to add this to a question I had, which is, when you prepare the play cards now for the individuals, the victory condition, do you have stereotypes in mind while putting that victory condition? Like, when we were looking at John's card, we were like, yeah, this is industrialist. So are there stereotypes that you have in your head? You may not be putting the labels out there, but is it there in creating those cards, those victory conditions?
So I'll answer the first question.
Yeah. Conflicts.
The conflicts and what kind of conflicts have arisen. Okay, so let me remember a couple of places from where I think conflicts have come out. I'll talk about two interesting conflicts. One was this very interesting thing where we did this at a seminar in a university, and it was a conference actually on the commons, and one of the players was constantly having to make choices that were completely against her ideology of what this should be, right? Of her understanding of what this should be. And at one point, she almost said, can I skip this round? And of course, within the game, we had this thing like, if you skip a round, one water card gets polluted, actually. So she said, but you can't like do this. Like, you can't just make this so difficult. Like, I don't want to make this choice. So, and at that moment, and the way I'm saying it is, of course, it's a thing that everybody goes through. But it was a very, very important thing, because I could sense that there was a real conflict that came to her as a player. Yeah. And I think that was an interesting thing for us to see. So I would say that was also very eye-opening, and she felt at one point that no, this does not reflect my understanding of what this should be like. Right. So that's also nice. That also gets challenged. Yeah. The second interesting thing happened when we were playing at the Kere Habba, the Kaikondrahalli Kere Habba, which happens in February every year. So there were a lot of parents and children who came and played, and we kept it as an open thing. So we played about 4 trial rounds over there. So we had a lot of parents and children, and in one scenario, it so happened that we told the parents that it's not going to be a combined thing. The child also plays a separate game. You also plays.
Yay! They were fighting.
So what happened was, there was a point when this young girl, she was like, she's like, no, I really want to make a building. The idea of developing and all that. And there was this thing from the parent that, no, put some water, put water, beta, put water. So, and at that point, our team also had to be like, can you please not sort of tell the child?
Or influence.
And it's a conflict for us. Like, अच्छा माँ बाप वो है, और हम वैसे भी हम ऐसा भी नहीं बोल सकते, but within the context of the whole thing, we could tell them that, okay, can you please not guide what the player should do? Let them make their own decisions. I'm sure they will think about it once they have made it. And interestingly, the child said, no, I want to place this card. I don't want to place water. And I think, that I think will take me nicely into this second question about victory conditions.
The stereotypes and
Yeah. So again, I think a more deeper game design question, the best person would be Dhruv to answer. But from our conversations, I think one of the things we kept is to constantly keep the off balance in this, right? So you might, now that's your thing, no? If you see your card and say I'm an industrialist, or if I'm somebody actually I'm very pro the idea of nature and biodiversity, then I would play it in that sense. But the fact that you want to pursue this, and till what point will you pursue this? And there are players where sometimes they've pursued the victory condition so well that 30 minutes in the game they're like, I have a victory condition. I won. I want to win. That's the whole thing. So there is an imbalance in that, and that imbalance creates the conflict.
Yeah.
Somewhere. I feel I feel I may be wrong sometimes. I feel we have kept ourselves away from giving it names.
Yeah.
You know, sort of archetypes of certain types. We don't want to do that, but you just play with this abstraction of just this. So yeah.
You answered another question actually, which was about whether this game can be won, or is it a no-win scenario. So winning is basically arriving at one victory condition, right? That somebody has on their.
Yeah, one is the victory condition. For a long time during our trial rounds, we also kept the winning condition as X number of cards when they come on the board, X number of water cards when they come on the board, would also signify a win condition.
Yeah, you had played that version with us, I think, some 8 cards or something.
Correct. Yeah. And there was also a time when we were doing a trial. So we also wanted to see that, one of the things we were also very clear that we want by the end for the people to have that tussle, to have the conflict. But then as the revival happens, there's also a certain sense of high, there's a certain sense of joy that sort of starts spreading within the group. And that joy is very interesting to watch. That also looks at a very interesting, like somebody was playing like John actually in one of the trial rounds. But you know what is interesting? At the end, that person completely transformed. And then the person just kept playing different kinds of cards.
We have hope for John, you're saying.
Huh?
We have still hope for John.
Pointing to John. This is like an indirect message to John. But yeah, I mean, those are some of the things we have discovered in the course of it.
So I have the last question actually. This is a question about, and very valid. It's a question about, like, we don't know really when we can assemble again, right? In the near future, when we'll open up to play something like this. The question is are you guys also thinking around having an online version of this game? Or is it simply not designed for going online? Do you need to be physically present to be able to play this? It's a question I had as well. I mean, because
it's a question we are also having. So we are contemplating on this. Well, if you ask me possibilities of going online, there is always a possibility. We've been discussing this internally. Dhruv and I have been talking about this. Of what is the possibility of doing that? What do we lose? What do we retain? And just before this, I was in another very interesting webinar, which was actually about looking at training and pedagogy during the sort of, the COVID crisis. And a question that also came very constantly in that, which was also the anchor point for the conversation, was shared space. We constantly spoke about shared space and what does shared space mean? While I'm in this window, in this format, I'm actually not in a shared space in a way, because I can put a earphone and I'm saying, "Mera turn nahi hai, main jaake ek glass pani pi ke aata hu." Just saying. But when you're playing it there, it's very there. No, it's like it's very live. It sort of has the tension in the space. From a very chatty group, it goes very quiet as the game becomes more and more dense. So we don't know. As of now, we have just decided to take a decision by end of September, actually, because we know that till September, things just look very, very uncertain. We may decide by end of September. However, the ideal version, I would say, I would like to see, and I'm sure all of us in the team would like to see, is to gather, to have people come in and engage. But an online version is not. We're not no towards it. But again, we are trying to see, is that the best way to go into it? It shouldn't be a reactionary thing. It needs to be well planned. So
also, but having said that, it's also true that there are lots of games which are entirely online. I mean, I remember how, and they are very passionately played and very immersively played. So like, I remember when Second Life was a thing, I had a second life. It was like actually living a second life. And one has been on online spaces and games to know how engaging. It's a different kind of engagement. But, and I guess you as a group have to first want that kind of engagement and wonder whether you want it.
Exactly. So do we want that one-to-one engagement here? Because again, that brings another question for us. Like it doesn't solve a problem. It might solve a technical problem, but it might bring a bigger, it might bring a much bigger moral philosophical question around the project, actually. You know?
Or if you don't look at it as a problem solving thing, or look at it as something as now you have an opportunity to see what could come of it if you were to imagine this as an online anyway, not because of a limitation that you have, but because of something that the online can give you which offline can't. Maybe to look at it that way rather than, you know, like ticking off saying what works and what doesn't. But it's a challenge for your team. And
it's a challenge, and this is how we will need to think, that we'll have to think about what would the online offer us that really also motivates us to go.
Exactly.
Because the other argument always remains that you can go online and go offline when things are fine. That always stays, but it doesn't work like that many a times in the terms of experience. If I have experienced something live, and if I go online, and if I experience something online, and if I have to go live, it varies a lot. It's very different for someone who's on the other side. So it also matters of so I mean, it's these kind of decisions that need to be thought through, taken with a lot of pros and cons in mind.
Thank you so much. I just got to know that Dhruv actually may be in the audience today.
Yes, he is. I had actually told him.
I just wanted to say a big thank you, Dhruv, to being there. And I mean, no pressure, but just in case you want to say something and about your involvement in the project. We didn't know you'd be there, but it's awesome that you are.
Oh, he doesn't have his mic connected.
Okay. But you can type something there, Dhruv. That's great. If you just want to say like what your thing was with this project, just a couple of lines, because I'm sure attendees want to hear or listen and see that. Just type it out. Okay, we'll give Dhruv time to do that. And yeah, I think we've come to the end of our time. And thank you so much, Chanakya, for taking us through this. John, do you have any questions? Any other, or should we call it a day?
I have a question, but maybe we can.
Yeah, if it's a short one, we can do it. If it's a short one, maybe we can do it.
So I'm just curious. As for theatre, this is quite unconventional for the theatre world. Maybe I'm not sure. So, how do you think the theatre world is responding to the experiments that you're doing?
One is that I'll play a very diplomatic answer to this. I can't speak on behalf of the theatre world, in that sense, because I think I'm sure, yes, this has brought in many questions for many people. And the more I think about it, I think these questions are going to come. We will also have to, as we go ahead, introspect into all of this. Our choices right now come from the way we want to pursue this project. And sometimes you realize some of the things after you've done it and you look back and say, this was an interesting choice. How would you retain this now when you go back to the theater? When I tomorrow make a play, and which is like happening in an auditorium. But one of the things that a couple of theater makers who have also responded and said that they have actually found this idea very interesting. And they've also found that this sort of a format allows for a different kind of engagement with the audience. That has been a very interesting thing for them. And for many of them, it has been a very big question, like, why? So I would personally say that I think it's a very valid question. But I also think the same question came into theater when people started using multimedia. Why? Why do we need? Why do we need multimedia? Let theater be pure. Let cinema be in cinema. Let video be where it is. This is my point of view. I'm sure many still disagree with video on stage. And I'm not saying that this will become like games will become a big thing now, but I personally think that there are enough works that are done by theater companies. Again, I would sort of reiterate that, and that use a lot of elements which can fall under game theory, which again falls. Again, you have to start thinking of game as a game theory. There's a huge element of game theory that exists. Richard Schechner writes about that in his performance theory books. So there is a discourse on it, and I think the discourse is developing. We need to take some risks. We need to try new forms, and these forms have to come with also decisions of why we make this choice. We are not just making this choice with respect to because it's a game, oh, it's fun. It's not coming from there. It also is coming from the fact that we wanted this to be about the audience participating in this. So that agency question was central to the project. And I think this format allowed us to do that in the best possible way.
Thanks, Chanakya. I want to read out what Dhruv wrote because people on Facebook who are listening to us, who is our audience, will not be able to read the chat. So Dhruv began by saying, thank you. Sorry, I don't have my mic connected, so I'm just on speakers. That's when we asked him to type it out. And he said, thank you, Chanakya, for a wonderful presentation of the game and a rather lucid explanation of a fairly complex mechanics. And that's really nice. He then says, having worked predominantly with video games, I found it fascinating how limited control you have over what the player do with the embedded systems of the board game. So that's his response to us on what he felt. Thank you to you, to Dhruv, to the entire Indian Ensemble team and all your collaborators, partners who've been part of this entire process.
They were also on the talk, so thank you them. Thank you to them.
Yeah, everybody who's here and who's been involved, thank you so much for coming and sharing this evening with us. I was joking with Chanakya saying, we call this Project 560. Obviously, John explained 560 being the first 3 digits. It's also like Project 360, this particular one. It's like from all around perspectives of about the city and what people think, coming together into one project. So that's been wonderful. Thank you. Before we close today, we are going to make the next 2 announcements. There are 2 very exciting programs coming up from IFA. The first one is on August 19th. And this is not part of our Throwback Thursdays, but this is something that the Bangalore International Center is doing in collaboration with us. And our grantee, Ushmita Shahu, is going to be in conversation with Mortimer Chatterjee of Chatterjee and Lal, the gallery in Bombay, on the work of Riten Majumdar. Ushmita got a grant to study the career and the life of the polymath artist, designer Riten Majumdar, who lived between 1927 and 2006 and has had a huge influence on across designers in the country and abroad. And so this conversation will be around an exhibition that was organized. So Ushmita Sahu is the researcher who's worked on this. And this is going to be on August 19th. It's a Wednesday from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. And you have to register, and you will see in the chat here, we are putting up the link where you have to go and register. And I'm hoping that somebody is also putting this link up in the IFA Facebook page right now. Other than this, we'll announce it on our Facebook page, our Twitter, Instagram, everywhere that we are. So that's about the next program. But the next Throwback Thursday is going to happen exactly 2 weeks from now, August 27th. Jahanara, who's our arts education grantee, she's working with children in a school in the Koppala district in Karnataka, and she's using various kinds of arts-based exploratory processes to work with children and their and their syllabus and their curriculum work in the classroom. So she is going to talk about how she's using folk forms, especially quilt making, which is a folk form in that area, in the Koppala region, and making it part of an arts methodology to work with in the classroom. So we are going to be listening to Jahanara, and we're going to come back at the same time, right? 6 o'clock, which is our normal time. Today we went at 6:30 because Chanakya said that would be a better time for him. So please do join us and keep watching us on our social media platforms and write to us. Thank you so much. It was amazing. Thank you.